the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is an artifact that has fascinated the world for centuries. It's a piece of linen cloth measuring 4.4 meters long and 1.1 meters wide that features a faint image of a man who appears to have been crucified. Some Christians believe it's the shroud that wrapped Jesus' body after the crucifixion. The scientific community has been studying it intensely and often controversially. The first written record of the shroud is from around 1350 in Lorraine, France, but we don't know much about its earlier history. In 1578, the cloth was moved to Turin, Italy, where it's still kept today in the Shroud of Turin Cathedral Chapel, which is how we know it today. The scientific journey of the Shroud of Turin got underway with image analysis conducted by Dr. John Jackson and Dr. Eric Jumper of the USAF Academy. By using some pretty advanced photographic techniques, including ultraviolet, infrared, and X-rays, they discovered that the images had a unique three-dimensional quality and were only on the surface of the fabric fibers. This was a pretty puzzling find for scientists and led to a whole series of further studies. Dr. Max Frey, a Swiss criminologist, took over the investigation and did pollen analysis using microscopy. He says he's identified 58 types of pollen, some of which are native to the Middle East. This supposedly proves the fabric's journey. However, these findings aren't without controversy, with some scientists questioning their validity. Blood analysis by Dr. Alan Adler of Western Connecticut State University and Dr. John Heller adds another layer to this mystery. They use spectroscopy and immunological tests to confirm the presence of type AB human blood with a high bilirubin content, which is consistent with the severe trauma someone who was crucified would have experienced. The research on the Shroud of Turin really took off in 1988 when a group of scientists from the University of Oxford, the University of Arizona, and the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology did some carbon-14 dating. By using the mass accelerator spectrometry method, they estimated the age of the cloth to be between 1260 and 1390 AD, which is much younger than what many people believed it to be, namely that it dated back to the time of Jesus. These results got people talking, and they're still discussing them today. In 2005, Dr. Raymond Rogers of Los Alamos National Laboratory challenged these dating results, criticizing the sample used. He said it came from an area that had been repaired in medieval times rather than an original piece of fabric. The controversy got even more complicated when Dr. Giulio Fanti from the University of Padua looked at the fabric under a microscope and said it looked like it was made a lot older than the carbon dating results suggested. Meanwhile, Dr. Peter Soons used computer modeling technology to create a 3D image of the image on the fabric, which gave us a new way to look at this artifact. Chemical analysis by Dr. Thibaut Heimberger and Dr. Jean-Pierre Laude using Raman spectroscopy and X-ray energy absorption spectroscopy found traces of pigments and organic matter on the fabric. But scientists still disagree on how to interpret these findings. The main thing that's still up in the air is how the image was formed. While there have been lots of ideas put forward, from radiation to chemical reactions to artistic painting, there is still no scientific agreement on how these highly detailed images could have been formed on the fabric. There have also been debates about inconsistencies with the biblical narrative, such as the wrist wound and the use of a single shroud. The Shroud of Turin keeps pushing the boundaries of what we know about history, art, and the limits of scientific analysis. It brings together the realms of science and faith, sparking discussions that go beyond the laboratory and into the realms of philosophy and theology. No matter how much research has been done, the question of how and where the image came to be remains unanswered. The Sedarium of Oviedo. The Sedarium of Oviedo is another mysterious relic. Just like the Shroud of Turin, it's a piece of linen cloth that's about 84 by 53 centimeters. Some Christians believe it's the cloth that covered Jesus' face after the crucifixion. The word Sedarium comes from Latin and means sweat cloth, which is how it got its name, because that's what it was used for, wiping the face. The Sedarium has a much longer history than the Shroud of Turin, with records dating back to the 7th century. According to tradition, it was brought from Jerusalem to northern Spain to escape the Persian invasion in 614 AD. Since 1113, the Sedarium has been kept in the Cathedral of San Salvador in Oviedo, Spain. It's only shown to the public 3 times a year. In 1965, a group of researchers called the Spanish Center for Sindonology started studying the Sedarium of Oviedo. The analysis covered a lot of different areas, including paleopathology, forensic anthropology, palynology, which is the study of pollen, and hematology. One of the most significant findings came from the blood analysis conducted by Dr. Jose Delfin Villalón Blanco from the University of Valencia. He confirmed that the stains on the Sedarium were human blood from Group AB, similar to those found on the Shroud of Turin. What's more, the way the bloodstains are arranged on the Sedarium fits with the idea that the person died in a vertical position, which fits with the crucifixion narrative. Dr. Max Frey, who was also involved in the Shroud of Turin research, looked at the pollen on the Sedarium. He found pollen types that match the flora of Palestine, North Africa, and Spain, which backs up the idea that the cloth has been on a long journey. Forensic studies by Dr. Guillermo Harris Moreno and his team showed some pretty surprising matches between the stain patterns on the Sedarium and the facial images on the Shroud of Turin. They found more than 20 similarities between the two fabrics. This finding lends further support to the idea that both fabrics may have once covered the same person. They haven't done radiocarbon dating on the Sedarium because they're worried about damaging the fabric. However, textile analysis by Javier Barta and a team from the Textile Research Center in Lyon, France, suggests that the fabric has characteristics consistent with textiles from 1st century Palestine. Even though there's a lot of evidence that the Sedarium and the Shroud of Turin are a match, there's still some controversy. Some people are skeptical and think the match is the result of careful medieval forgery. They also point out that the Gospel of John mentions the shroud and headcloth as two separate items, which they see as contradicting the claims about the Shroud of Turin. Dr. Mark Gushin, a top expert on the Sedarium, says there's strong historical and scientific evidence that the Sedarium is authentic. However, he also understands that just like the Shroud of Turin, it's impossible to prove that the Sedarium ever covered Jesus' face. The Sedarium of Oviedo, like the Shroud of Turin, is a subject that continues to fascinate scientists, historians, and the faithful alike. These artifacts connect the realms of science and faith, pushing the boundaries of our historical understanding and driving advances in forensic and archaeological analysis techniques. The Relic of the Holy Blood. At the center of the historic Belgian city of Bruges sits an artifact that has captured the attention and posed questions to both religious and scientific minds alike for centuries. The Relic of the Holy Blood. The relic is a cylindrical crystal tube housed in an elaborate golden reliquary. It's said to contain a blood-stained piece of cloth believed to be the blood of Jesus Christ himself. The relic's journey from an object of medieval veneration to a subject of modern scientific research shows how the relationship between faith and science has evolved in a complex way. The relic has a long history dating back to the Crusades. Tradition has it that Thierry of Alsace brought it to Bruges after the Second Crusade in 1150 as a gift from the Patriarch of Jerusalem for his services. Since then, the relic has been the focus of intense devotion, leading to the creation of the annual Holy Blood Procession, which is now recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage. For centuries, the relics of the Holy Blood were seen as sacred objects without much question. However, the modern era brought a new approach. In the early 21st century, scientists started to study the relic in more detail. In 2015, Dr. Joke Delis's team from the University of Ghent did a major initial analysis. By using Raman spectroscopy, they were able to confirm that the stains on the fabric were human blood without having to break the seal on the precious crystal tube. This discovery paved the way for a whole series of more advanced studies. In 2018, Prof. Peter van den Abiel and his team did a more detailed Raman spectroscopy analysis. With more sensitive laser technology, they not only confirmed the presence of human blood, but also found traces of proteins that matched blood plasma, which had degraded over the centuries. A 2020 stable isotope study offered new insights into the fabric's provenance. The analysis of the fibers visible through the crystal tubes showed that they matched the climate of the Middle East in the 1st century AD, which supports the idea that the relic is historically significant. The high-resolution 3D scanning tech used in 2021 gave us a whole new level of insight, showing us tiny details about the tube's construction and how it's been affected by wear and tear. One of the most innovative approaches came in 2022 with environmental DNA analysis. While the study couldn't prove the relic's origins, it did identify DNA from various individuals who had interacted with it over the centuries. This created a kind of genetic record of human devotion. In 2023, we tried to understand the Holy Blood relic in a broader context by comparing it to similar relics across Europe. We found some interesting compositional similarities. However, as the research went on, there were some disagreements. One big question that still remains is whether it's the real deal. While the research did confirm the presence of human blood, there was no scientific evidence to confirm that the blood came from Jesus Christ. This led to a debate between those who accepted the relics on faith and those who wanted a more concrete scientific evidence. There's also some debate about how old the relics are. While isotope analysis shows consistency with the 1st century AD, some scientists say this isn't enough to prove the age of the relics definitively. The fact that it's not possible to do carbon dating directly on the fabric because of the risk of damaging it makes the issue even more complex. And of course, it's done on objects that are considered sacred by many. Hajar Aswad. Hajar Aswad is a reddish-black oval stone about 30 centimeters in diameter. Today, the stone is made up of 8 small pieces of varying sizes held together in an oval-shaped silver frame. The stone is embedded in the southeast wall of the Kaaba, about 1.5 meters up from the ground. According to Islamic tradition, Hajar Aswad was sent down from heaven by Allah to Prophet Adam after he was expelled from paradise. The stone was originally white, but it turned black as it absorbed human sins. According to tradition, Prophet Abraham and his son Ismail used this stone as a foundation when rebuilding the Kaaba. Hajar Aswad has huge religious significance in Islam. Muslims who are performing the Hajj or Umrah pilgrimage usually try to kiss or touch this stone as part of the tawaf, circumambulation of the Kaaba ritual. The Prophet Muhammad is said to have kissed this stone himself, which set a precedent for later generations of Muslims. From a scientific standpoint, Hajar Aswad has been the subject of various theories and a limited amount of research. Scientists have done a visual analysis and think the stone may have come from a volcano, or maybe it's a meteorite. However, since we don't have access to a lot of scientific research, there are still a lot of questions about what this stone is made of and where it came from. In 2021, Saudi Arabian authorities released high-resolution images of the Hajar Aswad, giving us an unprecedented view of the stone's details and texture. These images were taken using some pretty advanced photographic tech, including focus stacking techniques to produce images with incredible depth of focus. From what geologists can tell from these images, the stone is probably from Earth. It could be basalt or impactite, a stone formed by a meteorite hitting the ground. However, without doing a proper physical and chemical analysis, we can't be sure of anything. Some scientists have suggested that the Hajar Aswad might be a meteorite, given that the stone is said to have fallen from the sky. Meteorites were often seen as sacred in ancient cultures, and a black stone with such an unusual composition would fit this description perfectly. However, without doing a direct analysis, this theory is still just speculation. The debate around Hajar Aswad mainly comes down to the clash between its religious importance and the need for scientific understanding. Some say that more in-depth scientific research could give us some valuable insights into the region's history and geology. However, others believe that the stone's spiritual significance outweighs the need for scientific understanding. Hajar Aswad has seen its fair share of dramatic events throughout its history. In the 10th century, the Sarmatian sect stole it and didn't return it for 22 years. During this time, the stone was broken into several pieces. In 1979, the stone was also the target of a failed theft attempt, which resulted in further damage. Modern conservation efforts have been made to protect Hajar Aswad. The silver frame that you can see around the stone was put in place in the early 1900s to hold the separate pieces of the stone together. That said, the impact of millions of pilgrims touching and kissing the stone each year is a concern for conservators. Even though we don't fully understand it, Hajar Aswad is a powerful symbol of faith for Muslims around the world. The stone connects the physical and spiritual worlds, becoming a focal point of devotion and reverence. For many Muslims, the spiritual value of Hajar Aswad goes beyond its physical composition. It's a symbol of the relationship between the human and the divine, a tangible reminder of their spiritual promises and obligations. The Buddha Tooth. In the city of Kandy, Sri Lanka, there's a stunning temple that houses one of the most revered relics in Buddhism, the Buddha Tooth. This relic, thought to be the left molar of Siddhartha Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, has been a significant spiritual, political, and cultural symbol for over 1,600 years. The story of the Buddha Tooth starts right after the Buddha's cremation in the 5th century BC. As the story goes, a monk named Kema retrieved a tooth from the cremation ashes. The tooth was then taken to Kalinga, India, where it became an object of worship and a symbol of royal power. The Buddha tooth made its way to Sri Lanka in the 4th century AD. Princess Hemamala and her husband, Prince Dantha, managed to sneak the relic onto the island, hiding it in the princess's hair to avoid the ongoing conflict in India. Since then, the Buddha tooth has become a symbol of sovereignty and political legitimacy in Sri Lanka. Over the centuries, the relic moved around with the shifting royal capitals in Sri Lanka. Eventually, in 1595, it found a permanent home at the Temple of the Sacred Tooth, Sri Dalada Melagawa in Kandy, where it still is today. The Temple of the Sacred Tooth, with its unique Kandyan architecture, is a huge and gorgeous complex. The relic is kept in a series of 7 progressively smaller stupa-shaped chests, each decorated with precious gems. These chests are kept in the inner sanctum of the temple and are only opened on special occasions. The Buddha's tooth is extremely important in Buddhist tradition. For Buddhists, it represents not only the physical remains of the Buddha, but also his teachings and the enlightenment he achieved. Buddhists have long venerated relics, sarira seglai, believing them to have spiritual powers and the ability to bless those who venerate them. Every year, the spectacular Esala Perahera festival is held to honor these relics. For 10 days, replicas of the reliquary are paraded around the city of Kandy in a grand procession involving dancers, drummers, and decorated elephants. The festival draws in thousands of pilgrims and tourists, making it one of the largest Buddhist celebrations in the world. From a scientific standpoint, research into the Buddha's tooth is pretty limited because of religious and cultural sensitivities. The tooth of Buddha is a bit different from other religious relics in that it hasn't undergone a lot of scientific analysis. It's tough for scientists to verify the relic's authenticity or age because they don't have direct access to it. However, some limited observations have been made. Back in the 1990s, a dentist named Professor Prelath Chandrasiri was given a quick look at the relic. He said the tooth was about 2.5 centimeters long, which is pretty unusual for a human tooth. Some people have suggested that it might be an elephant or buffalo tooth, but this hasn't been proven. There have been some debates over the years about whether the Buddha's tooth is actually authentic. Some historians and archaeologists have asked whether the tooth we have now is really from India, given the long and troubled history of Sri Lanka. There have also been reports of people trying to steal and copy the relics in the past. That said, for most Buddhists in Sri Lanka and around the world, the question of the relic's scientific authenticity is less important than its spiritual significance. The tooth of Buddha has become a powerful symbol of national and religious identity, representing Sri Lanka's Buddhist heritage and the country's connection to the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha's tooth is kept in a very safe way. The relic is kept under controlled conditions to make sure it doesn't get damaged. Only a few senior priests and high-ranking officials are allowed to handle the relic directly, and access is highly restricted. The Holy Lance. The Holy Lance, also known as the Lance of Longinus or the Spear of Destiny, is one of the most famous and controversial relics in Christian history. The story of the Holy Lance first appeared in the Gospel of John, which says that a soldier pierced Jesus' side to make sure he died. The Gospel doesn't name the soldier, but later tradition identified him as Longinus. Legends also developed that this spear had supernatural powers, giving its owner victory in battle. The first written record of the Holy Lance is from the 6th century when a spear said to be the Lance of Longinus was found in Jerusalem. It was later moved to Constantinople, which was the capital of the Byzantine Empire at the time. However, during the Crusades, several versions of the Holy Lance showed up in Europe, each claiming to be the original. One of the most famous claims is the Lance of Antioch, which was found by Peter Bartholomew during the Siege of Antioch on the First Crusade in 1098. It's thought that the discovery gave the Crusaders a boost and helped them to win. However, even at the time, people started to doubt whether this lance was really authentic. The most famous version of the Holy Lance is kept in the Schatzkammer, treasure room, in the Hofburg Palace in Vienna, Austria. This lance has been part of the regalia of the Holy Roman Empire since the 8th century and was seen as a symbol of imperial power. However, scientific analysis shows that the spear actually dates back to the 7th century, long after the time of Jesus. In 2003, Dr. Robert Feather, a metallurgical engineer and author, ran some tests on the Vienna spear. He found that the spearhead was made of iron from the 7th century. The nails that were embedded in it, which were said to be from the nails of Jesus' cross, were also from the same period. Aside from the spear in Vienna, there are a few other claims to the existence of the Holy Lance. There's also a spear piece at St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome that's said to be the tip of the Lance of Longinus. Etchmiadzin, the main cathedral of the Armenian Apostolic Church, also says it has the original spearhead. Meanwhile, there's also a spear that's claimed to be the Holy Lance kept in Vagharshapat, Armenia. The controversy surrounding the Holy Lance isn't just about whether it's authentic. Word is that Adolf Hitler was pretty keen on the Viennese lance during World War II. He thought that getting his hands on it would give him the power to rule the world. The Nazis took the spear after the Austrian Anschluss in 1938 and stored it in Nuremberg. When the war ended, the Americans found it and gave it back to Austria. Even though scientific analysis has shown that none of the spears claimed to be the Holy Lance date back to the time of Jesus, the relic remains a subject of fascination and devotion for many. Some researchers say that the historical and cultural value of these spears is more important than whether they are actually biblical relics. From an archaeological and historical standpoint, the Holy Lance offers some fascinating insights into how relics were made and used during the Middle Ages. It also sheds light on the role that relics played in politics and warfare at the time. These spears also show how legends can develop and stick around for centuries. Today, people have different views on the Holy Lance. Some Christians still see it as a sacred object worthy of respect, while others view it more as an important historical artifact. The Catholic Church itself is careful about saying whether relics like this are really authentic. They focus more on the spiritual value of the devotion inspired by the relic than on its physical authenticity. Even though there's still some controversy and mystery around it, the Holy Lance is still a powerful symbol in our cultural and religious imagination. It has inspired all kinds of art, literature, and even conspiracy theories. From Wagner's Parsifal to modern novels and Hollywood movies, the Holy Lance continues to capture the public's imagination. The Blood of St Januarius. The Blood of St Januarius is a relic that has been a source of awe and controversy in the Italian city of Naples for centuries. The relic is stored in an ancient glass ampule inside Naples Cathedral. It's a dark solid substance that's said to be the preserved blood of St Januarius, a 3rd century Christian martyr who was executed during the persecution of Emperor Diocletian in 305 AD. According to legend, after St. Januarius was executed, a local woman collected his blood and stored it in glass ampules. However, the first written mention of this relic in Naples is in historical records from the 14th century. Oral tradition claims that it had been there long before that. Together with the saint's skull, this blood ampule is kept in a beautifully carved silver reliquary, which has become a focal point of devotion and cultural identity for the city. The blood of St. Januarius is famous and controversial because of the thawing phenomenon that's reported to occur regularly 3 times a year on the Saturday before the first week of May, on September 19th, the feast day of St. Januarius, and on December 16th. The ampule is removed and displayed to an anxiously waiting public. Sometimes the solid stuff inside turns into a bubbly red liquid, which is seen as a miracle by many. For the people of Naples, this miracle is much more than just a religious spectacle. It's a sign that the city is under divine protection and that St. Januarius is still watching over them, protecting them from the various disasters that have befallen the city over the years, from the eruption of Vesuvius to plague and war. On the other hand, if the blood doesn't liquefy, it's seen as a bad sign. It's often linked to disaster or tragedy on the horizon. However, in recent times, this phenomenon has been the subject of intense scientific debate. Scientists have put forward a number of different ideas to try to explain the liquefaction. One of the most popular ideas is that it's a thixotropic effect, that it's a mixture that becomes liquid when shaken or moved and then goes back to solid when it's at rest. Some think a mixture of iron chloride hydrate might be the answer. Other theories point to temperature changes possibly caused by the body heat of the crowd, or lit candles as the reason for the liquefaction. Some people even think that the melting might just be an optical illusion caused by the movement of the ampule or changes in lighting. There have been a few hurdles along the way when it comes to examining this relic from a scientific standpoint. Church authorities have restricted direct access to the ampules for security reasons and out of respect for the sacred nature of the relics. However, some limited research has been done on the topic. In 1902, a scientist named Sperandeo got to take a close look at the ampule and noticed a big change in color from dark brown to bright red as it thawed. In 1989, a team of researchers led by Professor Luigi Garlascelli of the University of Pavia made a breakthrough. They created a substance with similar properties using materials available in medieval times. This discovery led to a new debate about whether the phenomenon might have human origins. Even so, the Catholic Church is still cautious in its stance. The Church does recognize the importance of the relic in popular devotion, but it doesn't officially declare the phenomenon a miracle. It seems the church is respecting the mystery that surrounds it. For the people of Naples and the many pilgrims who come from all over the world, this scientific debate doesn't affect the spiritual significance of the blood of St. Januarius. The annual celebration on September 19th is still one of the most important events in the city's calendar, combining religious, cultural, and even political elements. Thousands of people flock to the cathedral and surrounding square, waiting with bated breath to see if a miracle will occur. The phenomenon has become part of Naples' cultural fabric, inspiring works of art, literature, and even urban legends. It's a symbol of the city's resilience in the face of adversity and a reminder of the rich spiritual heritage that has shaped Naples' identity for centuries. The bones of St. Nicholas. The next item that has caused a bit of a stir is the bones of St. Nicholas. The man who inspired Santa Claus has left a legacy that goes way beyond the Christmas story we all know and love. St. Nicholas, who lived in the 4th century AD, was the Bishop of Myra, which is now in modern-day Turkey. He was known for his generosity and miracles, and he became one of the most popular saints in the Christian tradition as a result. After he passed away around 343 AD, his tomb in Myra became a popular pilgrimage site, but the journey of the bones of St. Nicholas only began centuries after he died. In 1087, a group of merchants from Bari, Italy, made a controversial but ultimately successful attempt to take most of the bones of St. Nicholas from his tomb in Myra. They brought these relics to Bari, where a magnificent basilica was built in his honor. This event marked the beginning of St. Nicholas's relics spreading throughout Europe and even into the New World. The Basilica of St. Nicholas in Bari became a major destination for pilgrims from all over the Christian world. But this isn't the only place that says it has the bones of this saint. Venice also says it has some of the relics, while other pieces are spread across churches in Europe. In 2017, something pretty shocking was found in Turkey. Archaeologists found an intact underground tomb beneath a church in Antalya province, and they think it might contain the original remains of St. Nicholas. This discovery has sparked a new debate about the true journey of the saint's bones. From a scientific standpoint, the bones of St. Nicholas have been the subject of some fascinating research. In 2004, a team of researchers from the University of Manchester, led by Dr. Caroline Wilkinson, did a facial reconstruction based on measurements of St. Nicholas's skull. The results showed that the face belonged to a Mediterranean man with a broken nose. This was quite different from the chubby, white-bearded Santa Claus we know today. A radiocarbon analysis of a bone fragment from a relic in Bari showed that the bone dated back to the 4th century, which fits with the period that St. Nicholas lived in. Genetic studies have also been done, and they show that the different pieces found across Europe probably came from the same person. One of the most intriguing aspects of this research is the mysterious liquid that is said to seep from the bones of St. Nicholas. It is known as either manna or oil of St. Nicholas. Every year, priests in Bari collect this liquid, which is thought to have healing properties. Chemical analysis shows that this liquid is mostly pure water, probably the result of condensation inside the stone tomb. Even though there's scientific proof, people still believe the bones of St. Nicholas have a spiritual significance. For many Christians, these relics are a tangible link to a figure who has inspired generosity and kindness for centuries. It's also interesting to look at how St. Nicholas became the modern Santa Claus. The stories about how generous he was, especially the one about giving gifts to 3 poor girls in secret, led to the tradition of giving gifts on Christmas Eve. Over time, St. Nicholas of Myra became Santa Claus in the Netherlands, and eventually Santa Claus in the Anglo-American tradition. Interestingly, while the image of a jolly Santa Claus has become a global icon, analysis of the original bones of St. Nicholas reveals a very different figure. A bone analysis shows he was probably on the short side, around 5 feet 4 inches, about 1.63 meters, with bones that show signs of heavy physical labor. The journey of the bones of St. Nicholas across more than 1,700 years of history shows how geopolitics, religious beliefs, and even science have changed. From a modest tomb in Myra to a grand basilica in Bari, from a political battleground to a subject of sophisticated genetic analysis, these relics have silently borne witness to humanity's complex journey in search of meaning, wonder, and connection with the past. The True Cross Relic. The True Cross Relic, believed to be a wooden fragment of the crucifixion cross of Jesus Christ, has long been an object of religious veneration. However, in recent decades, the relic has also been the subject of intense scientific research, combining various disciplines to unravel the mystery behind this historical artifact. The turning point in modern research into the relic of the True Cross came in 1998 when an international team from the University of Arizona, ETH Zurich, and Oxford conducted a radiocarbon dating analysis of a fragment kept in the Church of Santa Croce in Gerusalemme, Rome. Using the accelerator mass spectrometry AMS technique, the researchers extracted milligram-sized samples from the relics. These samples then went through a rigorous chemical and physical cleaning process to remove contaminants before being analyzed. The radiocarbon dating results surprised both the scientific and religious communities. The data showed that the wood dated back to the period between 980 1146 AD, much younger than the era of Christ's crucifixion, which occurred around 33 AD. The findings challenge claims of the relic's authenticity, but also open up new insights into the practice of making and venerating relics in the Middle Ages. While radiocarbon dating provides information on the age of the relic, paleobotanical research provides insight into the type of wood used. Dr. Avinoam Danin of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem conducted a microscopic analysis of the anatomical structure of the wood from various fragments of the True Cross relic. His study revealed that many of the relics were made of olive wood, Olea europea, or Mediterranean cypress wood, Cupressus sempervirens, both species that were common in Jerusalem at the time of Christ. Advances in spectroscopic technology allow for more in-depth, non-invasive analysis. Techniques such as Raman and infrared spectroscopy, FDR, are used to examine the chemical composition of relic surfaces without the need to take samples. Lasers aimed at these ancient fragments reveal the presence of various compounds, from wood components such as lignin and cellulose to pigments, waxes, and even modern contaminants. These spectroscopic results provide a complex picture of the history of the relic's interaction with its environment. The presence of pigments and waxes suggests centuries of preservation efforts and ritual practices. Meanwhile, the detection of modern contaminants confirms the importance of considering environmental effects in the interpretation of analytical data. Although this research has provided valuable insights, scientists face various challenges. Limited access to relics, given their sacred value, often limits the scope of research. Very small sample sizes test the limits of sensitivity of analytical equipment. Contamination from centuries of handling and veneration adds complexity to data interpretation. The Tunic of Christ. The Tunic of Christ, kept in Trier Cathedral, believed to be the garment Jesus wore at the crucifixion. This relic represents a complex encounter between faith, history, and modern scientific inquiry. The tunic is an unsewn garment about 1.5 meters long, made of reddish-brown wool. According to tradition, this relic was the cloak that Roman soldiers drew at the foot of the cross, as recounted in the Gospel of John. Its presence in Trier is attributed to Saint Helena, mother of Emperor Constantine, who is said to have brought it from the Holy Land in the 4th century. The documented history of the Tunic of Christ dates back to the 12th century, when for the first time it was explicitly mentioned in the records of Trier Cathedral. Since then, the relic has become a significant center of pilgrimage, with public displays or Heiligtumsfahrt held regularly, attracting thousands of pilgrims from all over Europe. From a scientific perspective, the Tunic of Christ has been the subject of several studies, although extensive research has been limited due to religious sensitivities. In 1890, an examination conducted by textile experts revealed that the tunic was made of wool with simple weaving techniques consistent with the Roman period. However, this study also identified some additions and repairs from more recent periods. Limited radiocarbon analysis has been conducted on the fibers of the tunic. Preliminary results indicate a date between the 1st to 3rd century AD, which is consistent with the claim period. However, interpretation of these results is complicated due to contamination and repairs carried out over the centuries. Non-invasive spectroscopic studies have revealed the presence of various pigments and preservative substances used over the centuries to preserve the tunic. The analysis also identified traces of pollen from various plant species, providing clues to the journey of these relics across different geographical regions, although scientific research has provided valuable insights. Validation of the authenticity of the Tunic of Christ remains a subject of debate among experts. Some historians argue that the tunic's origins may date back to a more recent period, perhaps the 11th or 12th century, coinciding with the emergence of great interest in relics in Europe during the Crusades. The controversy surrounding the Tunic of Christ is not limited to questions of authenticity. The public display of this relic has sparked discussion about the role of relics in modern religious practice. While many faithful see them as a means to connect with central events in the Christian faith, others question the emphasis on physical objects and spirituality.